Live on tape from 1983, it's Camping with Barry White Night on Late Night with David Letterman. Battle of the Network shows. Join Rick Brooks and Mike Kogel as they explore the TV of the 70s and 80s through hand-picked episodes of their favorite and not-so-favorite series. Hey everyone, welcome to another exciting episode of Battle of the Network shows. I'm Rick, here with Mike.
Hey, Rick.
And hope you're looking forward to this fabulous episode of Battle of the Network shows. We're going to be talking about Late Night with David Letterman, which will be interesting. But before we get into it, we want to talk a little bit about ways you can connect with the show, things we're working on, and just ways to get involved and kind of be part of the conversation with us. You can always email us at mailbag@battleofthenetworkshows.com. Check out our Facebook page. Just search for Battle of the Network Shows, and you'll go there. And you can also participate in our new Facebook group. It'd be part of our ongoing discussions we hope to do there. And we're also on Instagram. And we're on Twitter at Batnet Shows. That's BATTNET shows. So we're hoping to bolster our presence on these social media platforms, giving you information, giving you links, heads up about upcoming shows, and most importantly, we just want more ways to be able to talk to you guys and hear some of your thoughts on the show, maybe possible topics, and maybe just talk about the stuff that we're talking about or even stuff that we haven't talked about yet. So, having said that, let's get into our regular episode right here. And we are going to be talking about one of the certainly most famous talk shows and really a true giant, I think, David Letterman. We got to give him credit. Yeah. But we've kind of gotten into the talk show area before a little bit, but this is the first time we've really talked about David Letterman. We almost talked about David Letterman way back in the show's genesis through an appearance he made on another
that's
sitcom. True.
In one of our lost episodes.
Yes. He was actually...
No, we didn't even record that one, did we?
I don't think we did.
No.
He was actually on Mork and Mindy.
Yeah, that's right.
Early Dave, but we're actually going to be talking about Late Night with David Letterman, and it's an episode that was broadcast May 24th, 1983. A couple of things before I throw it over to you, Mike, I want to talk about, just to mention briefly, is one, I think we're probably talking a lot about David Letterman. The idea is that we focus mainly on his NBC show, which aired 12:30 on NBC weeknights, because that's kind of in our era. And also, me personally, I think as a shorthand, I always refer to like Dave. I mean, Dave as a broadcaster is brilliant. I also kind of tend to think of him and refer to him as the creative genius behind the show. I think we both realize that there were a lot of people behind the scenes, and we'll get into those, I'm sure. But if I refer to in shorthand, just like Dave is great for coming up with this, or David, it's just an easy way to do it. I don't mean to slight everybody else that was involved in the creation of the show. Yeah. With that said, this particular episode is Camping with Barry White. And this is a barn burner, and Mike, I think you kind of helped us help whittle down a list of things to choose from, and we kind of came up with this. We had a little help to come up with this.
Yeah,
though,
that's right. So I looked on YouTube on a particular channel that is basically devoted to Letterman, has amazing stuff, and kind of went looking at full episodes that were available and wrote a list. I don't know, it was like 10, 15. And you kind of picked like 3, and they were all these concept episodes. Mm-hmm. Since there were 3, I didn't know how to use a random number generator, but I used some other thing where you put in 3 things, or the number of a series of things, and hit a button, and it randomly chooses one of them. Yeah. So it chose this one, which is good. It was a good choice.
There's nothing we can't randomize.
That's right.
If there's a way, we'll find it.
Yeah. I don't know if we need to tell people who David Letterman is or any of that.
Well, he's been off the air for a couple of years as a regular presence, but yeah, he had a long, distinguished career.
Yeah, if you don't know his maybe his background before Late Night or The Late Show, of course, he's from Indiana. When he was in college, he was on the college radio station, caused a lot of trouble there, breaking format and doing all sorts of shenanigans. He also did some local news and weather, and I think had maybe gotten a little trouble there too, causing problems. And eventually went to California to pursue a career of some kind. I mean, he ended up in stand-up. I don't know if that was necessarily the goal. I think the goal probably, was always to be Johnny, right? Johnny Carson. And he did some acting, but is not proud of his acting.
Yeah.
He's on lots of game shows. That's one of the best things to find on YouTube, or these weird, because a lot of them are kind of oddball game shows. And, and he like at least one of the pilots for one, he filmed a pilot for one and was very in very Letterman style, derisive of the thing on air.
Like while doing it.
Yeah, and it had celebrity panelists, as a lot of those did back then, and that didn't go anywhere. Mm-hmm. He also auditioned for the lead in Airplane.
Yeah, this is... Which is amazing.
It is amazing, and the other amazing thing about that is that later Julie Haggerty had kind of an infamous appearance on Late Night, where she just wasn't a good guest, and he wasn't very nice to her, I guess. But she would have been his co-star, presumably, if or maybe not. Maybe they would have done a screen test and together and realized they had no chemistry.
Could be.
Yeah, and it was in part of that '70s stand-up scene with Leno and Jimmy Walker and all those Comedy Store people, and wrote for Jimmy Walker. I think that was his first job. Yeah,
he lived with I guess as part of the same, some kind of comedy condo.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were tight.
And I think he wrote for Bob Hope briefly. He was on that Mary Tyler Moore variety show, Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
Slowly found his way to where he wanted to be. But
yeah, it seems like ultimately his dream job probably would have been to be doing what Johnny Carson did, but at the time it would be very difficult to even aspire to that, because Carson was an institution, and you had maybe one or two people competing against him, but it wasn't like there was a wide variety of options that you have today.
Yeah, his stand-up appearances were well received by Johnny, I think, and he was a guest host for a while, and somewhere in there. And his big break was this morning show he had on NBC briefly that didn't last particularly long, but is the template for Late Night, and it just wasn't a good fit for that time of day, and the affiliates didn't like it. And
I'd like to step in here and actually thank friend of the show, Ian, and I think we'll be talking about him more next season, because he's shared some material with us that I think will provide some interesting episodes, especially next season. But he also shared with us a couple of examples of the morning show, and it was just fascinating material. So I just want to thank Ian for that. But it shows that even then, I mean, David Letterman was brilliant, and he was sort of pushing boundaries, and the self-referential kind of humor that we would come to know on the late night show was already there in the morning.
Right.
And including a lot of the same creative staff, too. So it's fascinating to watch.
And this might be a good place to talk about a couple of them. So I read Jason Zinnemann's biography of Letterman that came out last year, and he spends a lot of time on the morning show. And, of course, Letterman's main co-conspirator there was Meryl Marco, who's also his girlfriend, but, they had written stand-up together and written some screenplays together, and she was the head writer of the show, and brought a lot of the spirit, and things like Stupid Pet Tricks were her brainchild, but kind of a lot of the wordplay and things we associate with him. And she was a big part of that and Late Night. And the other one he mentioned, which it makes sense, but I had never thought about, was director Hal Gurney, who came on in the middle of the morning show. They did some retooling, and he came on, and he was basically retired. He had directed The Tonight Show with Jack Parr, and done sports things and stuff. And he something about he needed to renovate a room in his house or something, and someone contacted him.
He needed some cash?
He needed some cash, basically, and thought it would be fun, and then it turned into years of working together, and he was responsible for, of course, a lot of things that happened on Late Night later, like weird camera things, and, there was the monkey cam or chimp cam, and there's an episode where the screen keeps rotating. Things like that, and also embracing sort of the things going wrong. Letterman is more, his tendencies apparently are more conservative. Because he wanted to be Johnny. He wanted everything to run smoothly. And Meryl Marco and Hal Gurney both kind of embraced things not going smoothly. And there's an example he mentions in the book of Judy Collins is on, and she starts to sing and the microphone isn't working. And Hal Gurney, it's the first time he used his microphone to talk to Dave on the show,
right.
which is a staple of late night. And really, despite Dave's conservativeness about these things, that it the life of the show took up a notch when that happened. And another example of some prank they pulled where they locked the door for, the stage door, and Letterman couldn't get out of the dressing room or get where he needed to go. And Hal Gurney had set up a camera that was filming all of this. So the audience at home and the live audience were seeing all of this, and Letterman didn't realize it. And, and was kind of angry when they let him out, but but it made for great TV. So that was interesting to hear, and you can see it. And, those elements are, part of, I think, what we like about it probably, and a lot of people, there's the element of the talk show always making you aware that it's a production. A sort of meta thing, I guess, and a sort of futzing with the format and just the idea. The idea of a talk show is kind of inherently weird, and we accept it. But I was thinking, too, that, in a way, you hear people talk about Carson being at his best when he was bombing. And how he would react to that. And it seems like the spirit of late night was that was just always happening. It was constantly something going wrong. And, and the tension between making it funny, but clearly sometimes Letterman being frustrated with it too.
Yeah, I think it helped it feel, that improvised feel. We acknowledge that there's writers and everything, but the whole show seemed like it was off the cuff.
Yeah.
And partly it was because of the brilliance of the people that helped craft it. But even just things you mentioned Hal Gurney, even aside from the big concepts, if you watch some of the episodes, I've been going back and watching episodes and just even some of the conceptual episodes are just some where they go to different locales and stuff. And I'm assuming that Hal Gurney's calling the shots, but even just basic things like some of the shots they choose and just actual the fundamentals of directing, you can tell it's okay, this guy knows what he's doing, and it's serving the show. It's not just doing it to show off like tricks or everything, but the guy is capturing things and serving the comedy.
Right, and Zinnemann has a thing about him that in the main show, that he would keep an eye on everything and look for people responding in an odd way to things, and cut to call shots based on. He was always looking for the awkward thing going on.
Interesting.
There's another episode of the morning show where somebody's foot catches on fire, and
Gosh.
they hold I think it's a wedding anniversary for someone, and this one is on YouTube. I've seen that, and he's choosing what he's showing, and he shows that, but then he does other things, pulls out or cuts to a wider shot and keeps focus on Letterman in different ways, and makes comedy out of what is essentially a disaster.
Yeah.
And nobody knows it's happening. The guy doesn't even know it's happening.
Right.
It's something they did, to, I don't know, they're balloons or something that catch on fire. And that's happening because that show was live, right?
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah.
At 10 a.m. in the morning or something like that.
Yeah, after the Today Show, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an interesting book, too. If you're into Letterman, it's definitely worth reading. It's not all a pretty picture, but it's definitely focuses a lot on not just the guy, but the craft and what they built. And there's also that oral history.
Yeah,
that Amazon had, that shorter oral history that is mostly a lot of the writers.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like a lot of the stereotype of some of the things people think of the 80s, the top 10 list, the stupid pet tricks, and they had a lot of the recurring bits, and I liked those, and I had my favorites of those, but really it was just sort of the sense of hey, anything can happen, and you never know what's going to happen, whether it be something wacky, a technical failure, or, as you've alluded to, tension between Dave and the guests, tension between other people. There's all kinds of things that went on, and part of it, I guess, was that 12:30 time slot. You could sort of have a looser show than Carson was doing at 11:30.
And budget constraints, I'm sure, and at first, I'm sure, and the morning show, I'm sure, was full of constraints.
Right.
And I think I started watching it either around 87 or 88, but I definitely remember that 88 summer where there was a writer's strike.
Oh, yeah.
Them trying to make a show with no writers.
Is that with the network time killers, or
yes.
killers, Hal Gurney's network?
Right.
Yeah.
Things like that. I think the Monkey Cam was part of that. And, there was just it's just that spirit of like of him trying to hold this thing together.
Well, I always kind of thought that, to me, Letterman was the king of late night, and I think actually when Howard Stern would go on and talk about, he would sort of like make fun of everybody, kissing up to Johnny Carson stuff. But the fact of the matter is, they had to do different shows, and part of it was necessity. They didn't have the budget, but they couldn't get like the big guests wouldn't be flocking to do the 12:30 show. They'd be going to do Carson's show.
Right, and when they first started, at least, Carson, they put all sorts of limitations on the show about guests. And like the reason they have, the small rock band is because they couldn't have, a Doc Severinsen kind of band. Yeah,
they're a little territorial, and it was just kind of a different show. So part of it was necessity, but part of it, that spirit of anarchy was something that, as proves when Letterman eventually moved to CBS and took over the 11:30 slot, he morphed kind of more into that type of Johnny Carson type show that he had always kind of aspired to do. For me, though, this is like the glory years of the 1980s, and sure. I love this stuff and plan to be watching more of it. I kind of revisiting it now in preparation for the show. It kind of surprised me. It's like, why have I not been watching more of this?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this YouTube page in particular, I will watch random things, but I hadn't been watching full episodes much.
Yeah, it's not the kind of thing that not everybody can sit down and watch old reruns of the show, but to me, even a regular, and that's another thing, even a quote-unquote regular show of like Letterman hosting, he's got, say, maybe just 3 guests, no big wacky stunt or anything like that.
Right.
But it's fascinating to watch it on some level because he is just such an interesting television personality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's not always dropping things from roofs.
No.
He's smashing things. I think some of my favorite things have always, and they were on the, because he would do them, some on the Late Show too, would be the Man on the Street, or the the Late Show ones that are famous, or like him, working the drive-through somewhere, and things like that, or driving around LA with Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Yeah.
Things like that. Like, I think he's really good in those situations.
Yeah.
And I think I've told you before, I remember him, the first time I saw him, he was on, for a while, he did Man on the Street things on TV's Bloopers and Practical Jokes with Dick Clark and Ed McMahon.
What a combination that is.
Yeah. So there would be filmed bits, and I didn't know who he was. I was a kid. I didn't know. And then the other way I was sort of aware of him a few years before I saw it was my brother, who must have been watching it, had a book. There was like a late night book that had gags and, from the show in it. And the only one I remember, and I can't quite remember, somehow involved bowl cuts. I don't know if it was like a pick your bowl cut or match the bowl cut with the person, but Pete Rose and Mo Howard were 2 of them.
Yeah.
I don't remember. There was at least one more, and I don't remember the other one, but it had just like the haircut without the face.
I mean, I just loved like the absurd sense of humor, and there'd be like sort of these big grand bits, but also like these little like desk bits that they would do that would just be based on like the goofiest premises.
Right.
And my favorite was always the viewer mail. For some reason, there'd always be like something in there that would kind of make me laugh. And yeah, I mean, it's just, I think he's got to be considered one of the best personalities in the history of television. And I think this is probably one of my all-time favorite shows. Not in the sense that I've watching reruns over and over again, but just how entertaining it is. And I will say, like, even though I was very little at the time, I do remember watching Letterman, and I can remember bits and episodes of it. Whereas Carson, which came on an hour earlier, I remember being aware of it and watching it every now and then, having it on, but I can't remember, like, I don't have memories of watching specific episodes of Johnny Carson.
Yeah.
It's more like the reruns. I guess they chopped up the Carson comedy classics, and maybe that. But as far as just watching him sit down and interview the guests, I appreciate the show, and I love the reruns of that too. But it's more like the time capsule aspect of it, whereas late night still works as far as just pure entertainment, I think.
So, do we want to get into Camping with Barry White?
Yeah, I think maybe we should get into Camping with Barry White. It's about time we got into Camping with Barry White.
The clip actually gave some context. It didn't just have the show. This started as some sort of running gag, and then became an episode.
Yeah, it's amazing.
The clip had a few he's doing a monologue and says something about, I just can't believe one of our crew members went camping with Barry White.
Yeah, it just seems like this thrown out reference, and
Yeah, and for months. It like starts in March or something,
Yeah.
and then he's you see these other clips. They're like, "Oh, we're working on Camping with Barry White, and we'll soon give you the date
Yeah.
that it's going to air."
Yes, this wound up in May of 1983, actually.
Yeah. One of the things in that book, there's a whole chapter on Chris Elliott, who apparently was one of the big writers behind a lot of these concept episodes, and there are a number of them. We mentioned the camera thing. There's the first one he mentions is I can't remember how he refers to it, but the audience was voting.
Got to pick, yeah.
Yeah, and there's one I think we both watched where they do the whole show in a hotel room. There's another one where they do it in an airport.
Yeah.
I think part of Letterman wasn't totally always into this idea, but he eventually went with it because they succeeded and won Emmys and things.
Yeah.
I couldn't figure out though, like I couldn't find a date for that first episode, that first concept episode that Chris Elliott was involved in. And I know he became a writer. He was like an assistant, and he became a writer in 1983. But I don't know if he was one yet, and was involved in this particular one, which is not as high concept as some of the other ones.
Right.
There's another one that I think on our webpage, there's a link to the YouTube clip of one they did in the style of a 70s summer variety special. It was Harmon Killebrew night and
Yeah.
a lot of these weird ones. So I don't know if Chris Elliott was involved in this one.
Yeah, I don't know either. And he, of course, had a lot of, like, just characters that were concepts where not necessarily the whole episode, but he'd be like the guy under the stairs,
Right,
the seats, Marlon Brando,
Yes.
just kind of these ridiculous things where he'd do show up for like 4 or 5 episodes doing it and then move on to something else. And
Yeah.
it was good stuff.
Yeah. So, but this one involves Camping with Barry White.
Yeah. And they kind of take the idea and then just kind of fit it in the framework of a regular episode.
Right.
But they give you a pretty good simulation, I think, of what it would be like to camp with Barry White.
Yeah. So
Would you agree with it?
I think so. The tease at the beginning of the show, it's called Act 1, Close Call.
Yeah.
In which you see Barry White sitting on a set of a campground, and a very fake-looking snake
Yeah.
bites him.
Yeah, he's just kind of like talking to himself, and
Yeah,
Barry White is
Barry White.
communing with nature, I guess,
Yeah, and
as you would think he would.
yeah,
And he's bitten by a snake.
he's bitten by a snake, and then Letterman comes out and explains how to, not just explains, but demonstrates how to take care of the snake bite.
Yes, he reassures us that it's just an reenactment or a simulation of what would happen.
Yes.
But he urges us to pay attention because just think, we could be in that situation.
If Camping with Barry White and Barry White gets bitten by a snake.
Yeah, so then what would you do? Well, he shows us what we
Yes.
should do.
Including pretending to suck the venom out of Barry White's leg.
Yeah, yes.
And it also includes Barry White saying, "I don't want to die." baby."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was something else.
Yeah.
That's just probably the most dramatic part of camping with Barry White,
Yeah.
but valuable lesson for everybody,
Right.
for everybody at home.
Yeah. And then you get you get the opening credits and find out the other guests, Jacqueline Bisset and Bobcat Goldthwait, that guy, making his TV debut.
Yeah, that was something I didn't.
It was.
I wasn't expecting that. I did.
No. And Dave does his monologue, and
Yeah.
it's the 100th anniversary of the Brooklyn Bridge.
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of an abbreviated monologue, but the monologue, I think it's fair to say, was never his strong point or what he was particularly cared
And
about.
I think that was another one of the Carson constrictions, is this monologue couldn't be very long.
And Carson, the monologue was really a big thing for him, and
Yeah.
and like something that they would devote a lot of resources to. And I don't think it was the same with Letterman. I think it was just kind of like
No.
a formality in many cases.
Yeah, and you can kind of tell, and he seems kind of bored sometimes, or
Yeah,
starts playing with the camera or doing things, or definitely reacts to jokes going poorly. And, yeah, and that's a thing. Like on the Late Show on CBS, it seemed like the monologues would be a lot longer, and I don't think that was as appealing.
yeah. Yeah, and again, it kind of seemed to me like maybe, not necessarily in a negative way, I don't mean this, but it seemed like he was more trying to turn it into what he thought like an 11:30 show should be.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of it, is just kind of things like, okay, now we have the chance to extend the monologue, but did you really need to do it? I mean, maybe not.
Yeah.
But again, maybe that's, especially when we're going up against Jay Leno, who is putting his heart and soul into the monologue and really didn't care anything about the guests.
Right.
Or, he cared about his comedy bits, but the monologue was everything for Jay, right? So
Yeah.
I would, why even try to compete with that is what I would say. But
Yeah. Good point. Is the next thing
next was Act 2,
Two?
yes.
Getting prepared. Yeah. Which just started out great because so the way they have the campground set up kind of near the band.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this on the Tom Snyder, like, because that was the same studio and you could kind of see. But anyway, slightly backstage, and when Letterman's walking back there to set that up, the band is playing like Barry White music with a wah-wah guitar and stuff.
Yeah, definitely setting a mood.
Yeah. And Dave was amused by that.
Yeah.
And then it's one of those, it's sort of like basically a desk piece in a way, where there are a bunch of goofy props.
Right.
Things that you would have if you were camping with Barry White.
Yeah.
Not Gary White, then that's a whole different set of gear.
Yeah. It was almost set up almost like one of those game shows where like Wheel of Fortune or something, where you go shopping at the end of the round and they've got all the items lined up there for your perusal.
Yeah.
But Letterman takes us through those items.
Yeah. So those include a round sleeping bag with a mirrored ceiling attachment. And magic finger massage action.
Uh-huh.
Satin lined camo PJs. Solar massage oil warmer.
Yeah, that was something.
The solid gold mess kit ring. It was a little hard to.
Yeah.
So it's a pan, one of those camping pans that I think it has other utensils in it, but it was a ring. I didn't understand that at first.
Mm.
And then it's like jewel encrusted and painted gold. But it would be like a giant ring.
Very classy.
Yeah. A medallion that's also a bug zapper. A mood flashlight. I don't quite remember what happened with that.
Yeah, I don't.
And then a walkie-talkie, but as he points out, Barry White's voice is so deep that you might not be able to understand him over the walkie-talkie.
Like that.
So it has like a subwoofer attached to it.
Yeah.
It was good. And the show is really jam-packed with stuff, too.
It was, yeah.
I was surprised that I guess I'm used to the talk shows of today, which seem to somehow not have a lot of stuff over the course of their hour.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good point. I don't know how long they run these days with commercials.
Yeah.
I mean, these are probably about, they're 45 minutes? 45?
45-ish, I think, yeah.
Yeah. Maybe they're even run less now, I think. But
yeah.
I mean, maybe part of it, too, is like the fact that his monologues were short, so maybe that gave a few extra minutes for some little bits of stuff like this, but
yeah,
I agree with you.
Right. And then he interviews Barry White, mostly about camping.
Yeah, that was interesting. You'd think they would ditch it at some point and start talking more about, like new projects and like his music, but no, it was asking him if he's ever gone camping.
And he legitimately likes camping.
Yeah.
His wife
turned him on to camping.
He tells the story, but the first time he went, he, of course, did the classic thing and bought everything.
Yeah.
And didn't need it. It's good. He's a good sport.
He sure is. That was. I mean, hey, just being willing to have David Letterman simulate making an incision in your leg and sucking venom from a copperhead snake out of your leg. But he sticks to it the whole time.
Yeah.
Good for him.
And he does say he's. I guess at that point he was doing more gospel music. I must confess I don't know a lot about Barry White's career, but he does say that his songs are about love with one person. They're about love, first of all, more than other business. It was always with one person. He never encouraged anyone to, have orgies or anything.
Right.
Good he cleared that up.
Yeah. It's a chaste vision of camping that we're talking about here, I believe.
Yeah, certainly.
I think this is a transitional time in Barry White's career, actually. I think kind of like 1983, where like after the disco peak, but before like he sort of became big again later.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, it's Barry White, and instantly recognizable, but I don't think he was a big force as a musician at this point.
Yeah.
As a camper, maybe.
As a camper,
but not so
right.
much as a musician.
And then he performs "Never Gonna Give You Up," one of his classic songs.
Yeah, with the
world's most dangerous band.
Yeah.
Which is one of the things I loved about the old late night is that most of the time the band would play with the guests.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
Not all. I guess when it was a full band, they like REM. They didn't play with REM, but I guess Paul sometimes would play with people, but definitely like on the Late Show where they have a bigger stage, that didn't happen as much. I always liked that because you're getting a different interpretation, and they're all good musicians. And
That's a good point. Yeah.
so this was in the Steve Jordan was still the drummer before Anton Fig, but I think it might have been the second. It wasn't. I think it was Sid McGuinness was on guitar by then, but definitely he wasn't Hiram Bullock anyway. And then of course Willie and Paul Schaefer, the great Paul Schaefer.
Yeah. An essential part of the show, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure. Filling multiple roles, band leader, sidekick, balance to Dave's thing, which apparently took a while to happen. It wasn't like he did it once and people liked it or started talking back.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's like Letterman had, especially in the 80s, and one thing we haven't really mentioned is just the overwhelming reputation for being sarcastic and being snide that he had.
Yeah.
And Paul Schaefer sort of counterbalances that because he's sort of like, he's snide, but it's like he's got that love of show business, so he's doing like the smarmy patter, but in the sense that like he really loves it and he's doing it, out of that. It's just an interesting team the two of them make.
Yeah, and like Letterman is skeptical of all of that.
Right.
Or at least skeptical, not of the work, but all the attendant business that talk shows are actually focused on.
Right, and that's the kind of stuff that Schaefer like embraces.
Yeah.
And like plays up actually.
Yeah. And this sort of cool daddy-o kind of talking.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was cool. It was a good performance. I liked it. And he was singing more. He was more standing in the camping area while he sang too.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. That was a nice touch.
Yeah. We get a tease of another concept, International Day.
Oh, yeah.
Which included the Polka Queen of somewhere. I didn't write that down.
Yeah.
The Oak Ridge Boys of Czechoslovakia. The Steve Martin of Peru. And the Jane Pauley of Japan.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious about some of those, but
yeah,
that was coming up.
And I read that there were a few of those international days. And then we get an interview with Jacqueline Bisset. And what did you think of that?
Well, I thought it was very bizarre, and I think it's an interesting interview because I'm glad it was in here.
Yeah.
Because one of the things, again, he had the reputation for just being this incredible wiseacre, and I think sometimes, especially maybe with female guests, there'd be this weird, or they would expect him to be doing something he's not really doing. Whereas in this case, I thought he was pretty gentlemanly and actually seemed like he was trying to help her because he didn't really know what was going on with her.
Yeah.
And it made sort of an awkward but interesting experience. But I think he was pretty sincere as far as just trying to help her out.
Yeah, and the audience was sort of, as he pointed out, was reading things into what he was saying, like double meanings into some of his questions, which weren't intended. But so she was there promoting the movie Class. So it featured the then unknown Andrew McCarthy and Robert Lowe.
Yes, Robert Lowe. The good old days before Andrew McCarthy was known.
Yes.
Sorry, folks.
And there was a clip, but I think the poster edited that out for...
Yeah. To avoid possible complications.
Yeah.
So we didn't see the clip, but yeah, I don't know. I thought maybe she was nervous.
Yeah, I think she maybe was.
I think that's what it was, because it was very bizarre, because she really didn't seem to... I mean, it's a talk show. You kind of have to talk.
Yeah.
And she wasn't doing a lot of that.
Right, I think so.
He asked her, kind of going into the camping theme, but he asked, "What do you do for recreation?"
Yeah.
And she didn't really know how to answer that.
And he was kind of like, you're a beautiful woman.
Yeah.
So you must exercise, do something to stay fit.
Right.
Of course, he was saying fit, and in England that means attractive.
Oh, that's
I don't know if that would have confused. She
Yeah.
lives in L.A. or lived in L.A., so I don't know if that was a thing. But yeah, there was some awkward, and the audience thought he meant, something else. And of course, she'd done like this movie and another movie he mentions. Both involved her sort of getting involved with younger men, and
Yeah.
and they kind of talk. Would you do that in real life?
Yeah.
She's 39 at the time, I think, and would you get involved with a 19-year-old in real life? And there's some back and forth. I mean, some of it almost seemed like flirting, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think to me it was just like, okay, it seemed like a natural way to go and help maybe promote the movie, but
Yeah.
it was kind of bizarre. I really think he was doing a lot of the heavy lifting. She really wasn't helping him out hardly at all.
No.
But I don't think she was sandbagging him. I just think she was a little nervous and maybe not used to that. But I mean, it should be pointed out that she was a massive sex symbol. She's not as well known now,
Yeah.
but at the time, pretty much that would be what people would be expecting him to talk
Right.
about. So I can't
against
blame
all
them
odds,
for reading things in, but I don't really think he was doing that here.
No, I don't think he was.
I mean, she was in that movie with Nick Nolte, The Deep, and I think he said some reference about swimming, and I thought he was going to ask her, kind of tie it into the Deep, and maybe it was just me reading it, something in, because that was famous for her, just wearing like kind of see-through outfits or whatever. It seemed like the whole movie was an excuse to put her in wet clothes, but yeah, I don't think that was going on here. But it was kind of an odd interview, though. It just didn't. And there
really
was
something
click.
about some other movie she had made that tanked, that turned out to have been funded by the
the Moonies.
Reverend Moon.
Yeah. And she didn't really have any affiliation with them. She said, movies get funding from a lot of different sources.
Right.
She handled it well. It was just odd because I think when the first time he asked her like a question like that about what you do for recreation, she just pauses and seems like unable to answer it. But it's hard to tell whether it's because she's trying to think of the right thing, because she's embarrassed, or because she just doesn't know what to do.
Right.
So it was bizarre. But I think the interview showed that he was not just somebody that was going to be a predator and try to make fun of somebody. That if you had a celebrity on that needed help, that he would make an effort to help you out. Like, he wasn't out there to make anybody look bad unless he got irritated with him, and that's not at all what happened here.
Yeah, I never thought he was particularly mean. Like, that was a knock against him, and it just, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
I think he could get irritated or something.
Yeah.
But, people get irritated. That's, to me, part of the charm is that while I'm sure he's only showing us parts of himself, that he allowed some of that through.
Yeah. I mean, I think Cher thought he was, called him that. And,
right.
And sometimes people would have but I think a lot of it was just his impatience with, impatience with some of those trappings of show business, like just people coming out and giving prepared things and not engaging with them. I think he would maybe turn on them a little bit.
And I think, you mentioned Howard Stern, and I find, and I haven't heard or really followed Howard Stern a lot, but I find, when he's questioning people, he's sometimes, not necessarily mean, but pushing them into areas that are naturally uncomfortable for people to talk about. But to him, his whole agenda about honesty, he feels like everyone should talk about those things. And I don't see Letterman ever asking, I know he wouldn't be comfortable asking people about their sex lives or something.
Right. And that's what kind of makes it funny that he and Howard Stern actually got along so well.
Right. That
they have obvious respect for each other, but
yeah,
they do kind of have these different approaches. It's like the meanness. Yeah, I mean, you can say, well, for example, you watched it, we were talking about the one where they did it at the Milford Plaza, and he has they have a civilian,
right,
for lack of a better word, that was staying in the hotel with them.
Yeah.
And I think the guy, he asked him what he does or something. He's just like a systems
consultant.
And Letterman gives a look to the camera,
yeah,
right, or just it sounds like total BS. The job, the description itself, not what the guy is saying, but just seems like a BS job title or whatever.
Right, and later he does say this guy allegedly from Albany.
Yeah,
but
and it's hilarious. But he's more making fun of I don't think he's making fun of the person himself. He's more just life in general and just kind of corporate.
Right, and if anything. If he's exasperated with anyone, it's Hunter Thompson.
Yes.
Who is exasperating.
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
I mean, he's mumbling. He's doing. I don't. He's another person I don't know enough about. But
Yeah.
he's taking off his coat, and he's.
I don't know if he was a no conditioner performer, if he was doing a little sandbagging, but yeah, that didn't really work. But I think,
and at least once Letterman does one of those aside, like where he just bugs his eyes out. And,
right. Which is funny, and I think with regular people, I think he was usually.
Yes.
He was pretty gentle. It was more with other celebrities that he would get a little sarcastic and biting, and I don't really have a problem with that.
No. So after Jacqueline Bisset, actually, I mispronounced it earlier, but Bobcat Goldthwait makes his debut.
Yeah, what a debut it was, huh?
I enjoyed that.
I did too. I didn't understand half of it, but I enjoyed it.
I didn't understand.
Yeah. He's just coming out and yeah, that's even more Bobcat Goldthwait than what I remembered of Bobcat Goldthwait's stand-up act.
Right.
Like, it was really extreme as far as just totally like...
Yeah, just like being nervous and being... Or I mean, the character, his persona being nervous and weird sort of... I guess his jokes are kind of in that Stephen Wright, Mitch Hedberg sort of one-liner way, but then between it is this weirdo personality. And,
yeah, and he's like shouting out lines and slurring things and... Right.
I liked that he had a line about like, walking, how nice people were in New York. He's walking down the street and some guy said, "What's your problem?" And he's like, "Oh, he's concerned about it."
Yeah. I mean, there's actually some funny jokes, but it's just like the delivery is so distracting that it's hard for that to stand out for me.
Yeah. And then he briefly went to the desk and he had a portfolio of drawings he had done. They were all very childish.
Yes. And I do want to highlight one thing he said, like, at the end of his thing, he said something like, I hope at least you talk about me at work tomorrow. I said, whether you think I was funny or not, or whether I made you laugh or not, I hope at least you talk about me at work tomorrow. I thought that was really funny. I like this, like, well, mission accomplished.
Did, yeah. Yeah. And so I liked, too, there was for him a historic moment. His first... He would soon be everywhere for a brief time.
I mean, who'd have thought that was in the same episode as Barry White, Camping with Barry White?
Speaking of him...
He returns.
He returns, that's exactly... And I didn't know this part, but they had an essay contest.
Yeah, this was...
for Camping with Barry White.
They had encouraged people to write essays.
And the 50 top finalists were in the audience. The third prize won a Good Tone pen and pencil set.
Mm-hmm.
The second prize won a portable typewriter. And the first prize, which was a couple, won 3 days and nights of learning camping skills from Barry White.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how that plays out. That's even better than the prizes we give away in the Fame game.
Oh, really? I wish Camping with Barry White was a prize there. I'd try harder.
Maybe. Well, the pen and pencil set might be a little bit more realistic.
Yeah.
And they name everybody and have them stand up and get some applause, so everybody's acknowledged.
The couple comes down.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
The essay contest. And I guess what their vision of Camping with Barry White would be.
Yeah.
What an ideal day of.
And they read the titles. I don't remember that.
Yeah, they didn't do excerpts from them, but they did read the titles of the essays.
And I don't know if those were the real essays, but he has a stack of like folders. I mean, covers and everything.
Yeah. Just the fact that they had an essay contest amuses me.
And then Barry sang again.
Yeah.
And that
my
was
personal favorite Barry White song.
I didn't know the name of that song.
I think it's just "You're the First, You're the Last,"
okay.
or maybe it's just "You're My Everything."
You're my okay.
And maybe something is in parentheses there, but
got it. That's good because that song probably can play to both his audiences. Play as a romantic song or a God song.
Yeah, good point.
The Winners and Bobcat were standing on stage with him.
Yeah.
And Bobcat was doing all sorts of business.
Yeah, it was a nice little finale.
Yeah. And we actually, I guess again, the guy, person who puts up these clips seems to get a lot of them maybe from like the satellite feed or something. So, the credits rolled by and the show faded out, but we heard the rest of the audio, which probably didn't play when it aired on TV.
Yeah.
The screen was black. So.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Because some of his clips, it looks like maybe some of the ones in the compilations, it seems like they're sourced from reruns.
Yeah, like the Milford Hotel one was an rerun.
Which is interesting because I think the time that they were on A&E, right? A&E first for a year and then E.
And then Trio at some point.
Yeah, Trio ran them for 4 years. And like several of these times, like there were points in my life where I didn't have Trio. And I think when they were on E, I was maybe in college and was watching like the regular show, but just didn't have access to tape these or watch them when they were on E. Otherwise, I would have watched more of them, I think.
I definitely watched some there or A&E.
I remember some of the A&E showings, and Letterman was not happy about that deal, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because that show has had much more of a life in reruns than any of the other comparable show, I think. Just now in the last couple of years, you've seen like Antenna showing Johnny Carson reruns and Merv Griffin reruns showing up, of all places. But for a long time, Letterman reruns, and that kind of shows what a unique talk show it was that translated well to people actually watching it in reruns.
Yeah.
Like, and not just reruns in the regular time slot, but 5 nights a week, just replays of old talk shows. Probably
some of that has to do with that a certain amount of the comedy is not time sensitive.
Correct.
I mean, some of it is, but like Halloween costumes or something.
Yeah. And again, the de-emphasis on the monologue. I mean, the monologue sort of dates Carson's shows in a way that Letterman's aren't, because he wasn't doing as much topical humor.
Right. Well, this is a good episode.
It really was, and it just they took an idea, and I just like the fact that they had a theme to the show, but still worked in other things and sort of integrated all of it into it, and it all works.
Right. It somehow was still a talk show, but it had this thing.
Right. I mean, just the fact that like he was camping with Barry White, and he just asks Jacqueline Bisset if she goes camping.
Right.
I mean, it's just a natural way to tie things together. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. I was surprised when I started watching that it wasn't as conceptual as I thought. Maybe.
Right.
Like the whole thing would be always camping.
Yeah. From the title of the show, I thought the same thing.
And even when you see that tease and like, oh, Act 1, and you get these other ones later, but but I'm not disappointed.
No.
I think it worked, and like the hotel one we're mentioning obviously sticks to its concept in a different way because they're in that space, and they bring that guy in and they order room service and there are interesting things like the windows are open behind them and you can hear Times Square noise and see the curtains blowing. And Hunter Thompson is like all wigged out because the lights are hot on his front, but the window is cold on his back. But at the same time, it's still structured as a talk show. Mm-hmm. Carly Simon comes out and talks, and then she does a song. And, the shoe guy comes out and he talks. It's an interview, and they're on a couch, and Letterman's in a chair.
We were talking about how he does with. Sorry to interrupt, but we were talking about how he does with regular people, and you just reminded me of how, he's interviewing the shoe collector, and he's asking him how he got into it, and then he makes a reference to, well, I had an ingrown toenail, and Letterman just,
he's a podiatrist.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
And he just looks at him.
Because he's a podiatrist.
Yeah.
He's like, how did you get into podiatry?
Yeah.
And then he says it again. He's like, yuck.
He just has this look of disgust and wants to move on from
ingrown toenails.
I just thinking of
and apparently the shoe guy had been bumped all week or something. They've been putting him up all weekend. Not the Helen Hayes suite at the Milford Hotel. But,
yeah, I mean...
which I can't tell if that's a nice hotel or a seedy hotel.
Well, it was... I remember they used to advertise all the time on the New York stations when I was growing up. They do the Lullaby of Broadway.
Uh-huh.
And, at the center of it all is the Milford Plaza. And, boy, I saw that ad a lot of time. And they sure made it seem like a big deal on that... on WPIX or wherever I was seeing that commercial turn up. So for what that's worth, they advertised it.
I feel like maybe it's in between somehow.
Yeah.
Like maybe it was once a nice hotel.
Right. It might have been just like, well, it had a great location, but
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily a 5-star establishment at that
Right,
point.
it's a good tourist hotel.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's still that one really worked well too. Just having the band crammed in there, and being a little quieter,
Yeah.
and that at the end of that they had the hotel lounge singer come on and sing a song. And I give Carly Simon credit. She's like sitting there clearly enjoying listening to this other person sing.
Yeah.
You know.
That's good. So, do you have any other favorite memory? I mean, like, I guess some of the more famous ones where we mentioned Cher,
Yeah.
Sonny and Cher reunited on the show,
Right.
and there was Andy Kaufman and Jerry Lawler,
Yeah.
which has become notorious in recent years. The Crispin Glover incident was always very weird.
Right.
There would be some of these weird things, especially in the NBC. The American Splendor, cartoonist was a recurring character who kind of would trade jabs with Dave apparently sometimes. But
And the Avengers that were
oh yeah, there's a comic
Marvel
book
comic.
where it was. I think it was during one of their assistant editors month gimmick.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And they had, I think it was the Avengers, the West Coast Avengers. I think maybe it was the regular Avengers, but I know
think so.
Hawkeye was involved somehow.
Yeah.
Because when Hawkeye had his hearing, his hearing had been damaged, and he had there was hijinks ensued because he didn't want to admit that his hearing was gone in one ear, so he had troubles understanding Dave. And his big feud. The other thing, his feuds with like Bryant Gumbel.
Right.
And he would have like feuds with like GE and just kind of these things going back. I guess
those
that's
I
another thing
remember
that the show was known for.
A lot, like the GE ones, and of course, at the end, once he hadn't gotten to the Tonight Show, and being very cranky.
Yeah.
And but then some things I'm remembering are probably more Late Show things, like his dumb guy voice and
yeah. I was like dumb guy voice.
Just kind of like it too, though, like the words his obsession with words, Kenny.
Yeah.
That name, which apparently went back to that was like at least in something he did with the Merrill Marker. Like I think one of their screenplays was about a guy named Kenny, or canned ham. He would bring out various meats.
Yeah.
Just things like that.
Like Pants.
Worldwide
Pants Incorporated production company.
Right. Later in the Late Show, I think the things with his mom were usually good. And, some of the things with the people in the neighborhood were okay. And a lot of it's just the attitude. But I know it was like a big influence on my sense of humor. Or, one of those things where it's confirming your sense of humor and then you embrace it.
Yeah. I think definitely like our sensibilities were more matched with that show. I mean, the 12:30 show especially was not for everyone.
No.
I mean, I could see people just thinking, oh, he's just, a smart aleck and not getting into that. But for me, I thought that was great. Just the fact that he was sort of like embracing and mocking it, with the show.
Yeah. And it is.
It just kind of had an attitude about everything.
Was perfect for high school and college people. I mean, I think maybe it tends to be seen as a guy show in particular, but I don't know if that's an actual criticism or an actual fact or just kind of gets how it's seen. Mm-hmm. Like I definitely feel like there's something different between him and even Stern, which of course a lot of women listen to Stern too and like him, but or I guess I associate because of the time when I started watching this and the people who kind of were watching it or introduced it to me was around the same time as Morton Downey Jr., which, there's not really any comparison, but there are elements of that, I think, that are like the next level or next 3 levels of the kind of things that were going on here. A little bit, the amateur part of it.
And I had friends, I think would get irritated by one thing he would repeat something over and over again.
I love that.
and just like, call back to something that went bad in the monologue and just randomly say like, trains, Paul, trains,
right,
and there'd be a sound effect or something like that, and I enjoyed that too.
Yeah.
I think on the morning shows, like the last two morning shows that I was watching, there was like a bit because they had been canceled and game shows were coming in, so he kept making fun of, or just kind of calling attention to the fact that game shows were coming in, and he had a buzzer They kept doing the buzzer like at random times, like just getting everybody used to that, like so to punctuate some kind of a punchline, he'd hit the buzzer.
I think there's an episode of that where he watches the other channels. Like he has a TV on the desk. And
that's great. And another thing I'll just kind of work this in is the fact that in one of those morning shows I happen to watch, he had Steve Allen on. Mm-hmm. Clearly, he had a big reverence for Steve Allen, like he did, Tom Snyder and Johnny Carson. But Steve Allen, people talked about it. It seemed to be like a cottage industry for a while to point out that a lot of the stuff that Dave did was done by Steve Allen, and not just by Steve Allen. Right. Other people would point that out too. But I enjoyed watching this because he's interviewing Steve Allen and he's asking him directly about these things, and you could tell. I mean, he's acknowledging the debt to him, and just the respect came through. So I think hopefully everybody would realize that. But the notion that he stole anything from Steve Allen is ridiculous. Mm-hmm. I mean, he knew there was no pretense to it at all. He was just kind of carrying on the tradition.
Yeah. I imagine probably like Ernie Kovacs.
Exactly. Like Velcro suits and just sort of playing around with the form and experimenting. I'm like, maybe some of the stuff we talked about might have already been done by some of those. But
I think all of that is maybe another thing that separates it, the always recognizing that it's a TV show.
Yeah.
Whereas a regular talk show doesn't necessarily acknowledge that what it is. Mm-hmm. Whereas, Letterman, you see the cameras, you see the cue card guy, you Biff and all these other people are like him asking how much time they have left. And
they're part of the show. They're actual cast members and not just crew.
Right. And I think the other talk shows tend to give the illusion that it's not a talk show somehow.
Yeah.
Even though it is a person sitting at a desk talking to another person, which is not a person who's beside them. It's not even like an office situation or something.
Yeah, and I give him credit that the whole experimenting with the medium thing, maybe a lot of it was done earlier as well. However, I also think there's a difference between doing it in the 1950s and early 60s when television is more in its infancy.
Right.
And even though you are doing it at 12:30, doing it on network TV, on a regular basis when nobody else is really doing that kind of stuff, I think Letterman and everybody involved with that show deserve a lot of credit for pulling that off. And being not just experimental, but entertaining on a night in, night out basis. There might have been off nights or things where things didn't work, not necessarily to a comic effect, but I think the show was consistently, whenever I watched it, I was rarely disappointed. There was always something in there.
Right. You might remember on our Mary Tyler Moore episode, I said that, that might have been the most influential show we had talked about yet. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to take that back because the word "yet" is in there.
Yeah.
But I would probably say that
you covered yourself pretty well.
Yeah. We've now reached a new "yet."
Perhaps.
Because certainly, late night had a huge effect on comedy in its own time, but also like the people who are around our age or a little older who grew up with it.
Yeah, I could be wrong on this, and I hadn't really thought about this until now, but I see more influence from late night than, say, Saturday Night Live. And they did share some talent, including like one of the head writers, but to me, like the sensibility that you see so many other places now is directly from David Letterman, and that's sort of that tree, more so than Saturday Night Live. Saturday Night Live is notable for being an institution and spawning stars, but as far as like the behind the scenes, like the writing and just the general attitude, I mean, things like The Simpsons, obviously Conan O'Brien and other shows like that. But, I mean, I think Simpsons, Arrested Development, many of these shows could sort of be traced back to that whole David Letterman style.
Yeah, I think even, Seinfeld a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Just besides Letterman being one of the places Seinfeld made his bones. But, some of the writers from that went on to Seinfeld. From Letterman went on to Seinfeld. And, I think there's that SNL National Lampoon tree.
Yeah.
But then there's this one, too. And some of the, there's connections. And like this one was from that era when Jim Downey was the head writer, who's more associated with SNL. But yeah, I think it's a huge influence.
Well, it's kind of like Saturday. So when SNL came on, I think part of it was designed to attract people that didn't normally watch TV.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was too young to not watch TV. I was young, I watched TV. So I watched David Letterman, but I suspect it was that same kind of deal where people would watch that who wouldn't necessarily be watching Magnum PI or
Yeah.
even Cosby Show or something like that.
Right.
Like you said, like college, even maybe high school, but college people and people that were up late enough to be watching something at 12:30. I mean,
Right.
that's another thing is you're naturally going to have a limited audience at that time, and
Yeah.
you can get away with things that you wouldn't if you're doing some kind of mass appeal show at 8 p.m.
Yep.
So, again, I'd say a big thanks. I think we're kind of not saying his name, maybe because I don't want to jinx it, but
Right. Yeah.
you will know the YouTube channel
Yeah.
we're talking about instantly when you find it. And big thanks
Yeah.
to whoever and whatever is making that possible,
Right.
even if it's just him himself, because it is a treasure trove of material. And if there's something specific that we've jogged your memory on and you want to go look at, there's probably a way you can find it there, and maybe even a themed collection that you'll be able to get just the highlights of it.
Yeah. I think so. And I think we're just about out of time, right, Morty? Yeah, we're sorry. No, Morty wasn't even on this episode, part of this episode. Whatever. We're done.
This episode brought to you by, seriously? You expect us to follow Letterman with some nickel and dime funny sponsors? Join us next time for another exciting episode of Battle of the Network Shows. Learn more, leave feedback, and suggest future episodes at battleofthenetworkshows.com. Follow us on Twitter at BatNetShows, and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Battle of the Network Shows.